Friedrich Fritz Kreisler was an Austrian-born violinist and composer. One of the most famous violin masters of his or any other day, and regarded as one of the greatest violinists of all time, he was known for his sweet tone and expressive phrasing. Like many great violinists of his generation, he produced a characteristic sound which was immediately recognizable as his own. Although he derived in many respects from the Franco-Belgian school, his style is nonetheless reminiscent of the gemütlich lifestyle of pre-war Vienna. Life and career. Kreisler was born in Vienna, the son of Anna and Samuel Kreisler, a doctor. Of Jewish heritage, he was baptized at age 12. He studied at the Vienna Conservatory and in Paris, where his teachers included Anton Bruckner, La Copyright Odelibes, Jacob Dont, Joseph Helmesberger, J.R., Joseph Massart, and Jules Massenet. While there, he won the Premier Grand Prix de Rome gold medal, competing against 40 other players, all of whom were at least 20 years of age. He made his United States debut at Steinway Hall in New York City on November 10, 1888, and his first tour of the United States in 1888 to Euro 1889 with Maurice Rosenthal, then returned to Austria and applied for a position in the Vienna Philharmonic. He was turned down by the concertmaster Arnold Rosa Copyright. As a result, he left music to study medicine. He spent a brief time in the army before returning to the violin in 1899, giving a concert with the Berlin Philharmonic conducted by Arthur Nikisch. It was this concert and a series of American tours from 1901 to 1903 that brought him real acclaim. In 1910, Kreisler gave the premiere of Sir Edward Elgar's Violin Concerto, a work commissioned by and dedicated to him. He served briefly in the Austrian army in World War I before being honorably discharged after he was wounded. He arrived in New York on November 24, 1914, and spent the remainder of the war in America. He returned to Europe in 1924, living first in Berlin, then moving to France in 1938. Shortly thereafter, at the outbreak of World War II, he settled once again in the United States, becoming a naturalized citizen in 1943. He lived there for the rest of his life, giving his last public concert in 1947 and broadcast performances for a few years after that. On April 26, 1941, he was involved in a serious traffic accident. Struck by a truck while crossing a street in New York, he suffered a fractured skull and was in a coma for over a week. In his later years, he suffered from not only some hearing loss but also sight deterioration due to cataracts. Kreisler died of a heart condition aggravated by old age in New York City in 1962. He was interred in a private mausoleum in Woodlawn Cemetery, Bronx, New York. Legacy. Kreisler wrote a number of pieces for the violin, including solos for encores, such as Liebes Lied, and Liebes Fried. Some of Kreisler's compositions were pastiches in an ostensible style of other composers, originally ascribed to earlier composers such as Gaetano Pugnani, Giuseppe Tartini, and Antonio Vivaldi. Then, in 1935, Kreisler revealed that he actually wrote the pieces. When critics complained, Kreisler replied that they had already deemed the compositions worthy. "The name changes, the value remains," he said. He also wrote operettas including Apple Blossoms in 1919 and Sissy in 1932, a string quartet and cadenzas, including ones for the Brahms D major violin concerto, the Paganini D major violin concerto, and the Beethoven D major violin concerto. His cadenzas for the Beethoven concerto are the ones most often employed by violinists today. He performed and recorded his own version of the first movement of the Paganini D major violin concerto. This version is rescored and in some places reharmonized. The orchestral introduction is completely rewritten in some places. The overall effect is of a late 19th century work. Kreisler owned several antique violins crafted by luthiers Antonio Stradivari, Pietro Guarnieri, Giuseppe Guarnieri, and Carlo Bergonzi, most of which eventually came to bear his name. He also owned a Jean-Baptiste Voillon violin of 1860, which he often used as his second violin, and which he often loaned to the young prodigy Joseph Hausut. On recordings, Kreisler's style resembles that of his younger contemporary Mischa Elman, with a tendency toward expansive tempi, a continuous and varied vibrato, expressive phrasing, and a melodic approach to passage work. Kreisler makes considerable use of portamento and rubato. The two violinists' approaches are less similar in big works of the standard repertoire, such as Felix Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto, than in smaller pieces. A Trip to a Kreisler Concert is recounted in Siegfried Sassoon's 1928 autobiographical novel Memoirs of a Fox-Hunting Man. Work. Compositions see, List of compositions by Fritz Kreisler, see also, Musical Hoax. Recordings Kreisler's work has been reasonably well represented on both LP and CD reissues. Original masters were made on RCA Victor and HMV. His final recordings were made in 1950. Bach Concerto for two violins in D minor, BWV 1043, with a fremzimbalist, and a string quartet Rec. January 4, 1915. Beethoven Violin Concerto in D major, Op. 61, with Leo Blech, Berlin State Opera Orchestra. Rec. December 15, 1926. Beethoven Violin Concerto in D major, Op. 61, with John Barbirolli, London Philharmonic Orchestra. Rec. June 16, 1936. Beethoven Sonata No. 8 in G major, Op. 30, No. 3, with Sergei Rachmaninoff, P.F. Rec. March 22, 1928. Beethoven Sonata No. 9 in A major, Op. 47, with Franz Rupp, P.F. Rec. June 17, Euro 19, 1936. Brahms Violin Concerto in D major, Op. 77 with Leo Blech, Berlin State Opera Orchestra, Rec. November 21, 1927. Brahms Violin Concerto in D major, Op. 77 with John Barbirolli, London Symphony Orchestra, Rec. June 18, 1936. Grieg Sonata No. 3 in C minor, Op. 45, with Sergei Rachmaninoff, P.F. Rec. December 14, Euro 15, 1928. Mendelssohn Violin Concerto in E minor, Op. 64, with Leo Blech, Berlin State Opera Orchestra. Rec. December 9, 1926. Mendelssohn Violin Concerto in E minor, Op. 64, with Landon Ronald, London Symphony Orchard. Rec. April 8, 1935. Mozart Violin Concerto in D major, K218, with Landon Ronald, London Symphony Orchestra, Rec. December 1, 1924. Paganini Violin Concerto in D major, Op. 6, with Eugene Ormandy, Philadelphia Orchestra, Rec. December 13, 1936. Schubert Sonata No. 5 in A major, D 574, with Sergei Rachmaninoff, P.F. Rec. December 20, 1928. Attribution. Vivaldi, RVN 62 Violin Concerto in C major, with Donald Voores, RCA Victor Orchestra, Rec. May 2, 1945. Broadway Apple Blossoms a Euro operetta a Euro co-composer. Continental Varieties a Euro review a Euro featured composer for Caprice Viennois, and La Gitana. Reunion in New York a Euro review a Euro featured composer for Stars in Your Eyes. Rhapsody a Euro musical a Euro composer. Autobiography Kreisler, Fritz. 4 Weeks in the Trenches. Boston, New York, Houghton Mifflin. OCLC 1161448. References. Further sources, John McCormack, Great Irish Tenor, in Houston Thursday. The Houston Post December 5, 1915. Pages 29 a Euro via newspapers.com. External links, Fritz Kreisler's page at Carl Fischer, Fritz Kreisler at AllMusic, Fritz Kreisler at the Internet Broadway Database. Works by Fritz Kreisler at Project Gutenberg, works by or about Fritz Kreisler at Internet Archive, works by Fritz Kreisler at LibriVox, free scores by Fritz Kreisler at the International Music Score Library Project, an assembled edition of original pieces and arrangements for violin and piano by Fritz Kreisler. From Sibley Music Library Digital Scores Collection, Fritz Kreisler String Quartet and a Minor Soundbites and Discussion of Work, Discography of Fritz Kreisler on Victor Records from the Encyclopedic Discography of Victor Recordings, Recordings of Fritz Kreisler on the Library of Congress Jukebox, the International Fritz Kreisler Violin Competition.